So thank you so much again for coming. My name is Sarah Erdreich. I'm the events coordinator here. And really on behalf of the entire staff, I'm so pleased to welcome you. And I'm so pleased to welcome Sarah Erdreich tonight to discuss her book, Generation Roe, Inside the Future of the Pro-Choice Movement. In the book, Sarah presents some of the voices of the women who choose abortion and why. Her writings on abortion have been noted by Jezebel, Feministing, and the National Partnership for Women and Families, and has been published in many publications, including On the Issues and Lilith. She's also worked editorially with the magazines Hue and Teen Voices. Thank you again so much for coming. We really look forward to welcoming your civil questions, and we're looking forward to a great discourse tonight. Thank you so much, and please join me in welcoming Sarah Erdreich to Politics in Prose.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. And thank you to Politics in Prose for having me. I'm always been a fan of your bookstore even before I moved to DC, so this is a real honor. Thank you. So I've always been interested in controversial topics. Anything that you're not supposed to discuss in polite society, anything that makes people lower their voices. From a young age, I was interested in anything like that. So reproductive rights, abortion, really kind of fell right along those lines. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s in a very liberal town and a very liberal family. But particularly in the late 80s, early 90s, those were the years where abortion was under siege, occasionally literally, as in Wichita, Kansas in the early 90s, with the Summer of Mercy protests. So paying attention to all these stories on the news, hearing how the lengths that people who are anti-choice would go to make their views heard, I was curious about that, about why abortion was such a difficult topic, one that people felt so strongly about. Because as I said, for me growing up where I did, it was a non-issue. Women had the right to do with their bodies what they felt was best. So that's what got me interested in reproductive rights in the first place. In 2008, after I'd moved to DC, I began working at the National Abortion Federation on their hotline, helping women who had called and had questions about abortion, how much it would cost, where they could get the procedure done, any number of questions around the topic. And before I started working at NAF, I thought I knew a lot about abortion. Like I said, this was 2008. It was after Gonzales v. Carhart. It was after I'd been in college and had a number of friends who had chosen abortion for one reason or another. And it was after I lived in areas of the country that were pretty politically diverse. So I thought going in, I know what I'm signing up for. I was really wrong when I started at NAF. I learned every day just how little I knew about reproductive rights in America in the 21st century. I would come home from work every day just ranting and raving about how far women had to travel, what they had to do to raise the money to come up with their procedures. And what was most heartbreaking to me personally would be the women who would call and we would talk about their situation. And then they would say to me, "You're the first person I've told. I can't tell anyone that I know that I'm pregnant or that I'm having an abortion." And I was glad that I was that person for them. But I found it absolutely heartbreaking that they could not tell the people closest to them what was going on in their lives. And that to me really just said so much about how abortion is stigmatized and how the lengths that women have to go to get a legal health service in this country. In early 2009, the New York Times Style section ran an article titled "Where to Pass the Torch." And it was about those providers and clinic directors and counselors who were starting to approach retirement age and who were no longer going to be working at the same rate in the pro-choice movement. And the focus of the article was who's going to be coming up to take their place. Where are the younger activists and the younger providers and the younger clinic directors? And this article caused a lot of conversation where I worked and on the blogs and newspapers I read. And after thinking about this and hearing all this conversation for a few days, I realized I'm surrounded by this next generation of activists. I'm surrounded by these people that want to go to medical school and become providers, that want to go to law school and work in reproductive rights, that want to open their own clinics. And I decided their stories, why they're in this movement and what the future of this movement is, should be told. So when I started writing this book, I did a number of interviews. I think there ended up being about 75 with clinic directors and physicians, providers, attorneys across the country. The focus was on those born in 1973 or later. So those of us who have grown up with legal abortion, who have been able to take this right for granted, yet still want to go into this field and still feel it is important. I also did a lot of research, a lot of medical research, legal research, looking at different aspects of reproductive rights and their importance. So I learned a lot from this process, but I also was given reason to examine my own behavior in ways that I did not expect. In the summer of 2009, I did an interview with a Dr. Wayne Goldner. He is one of the last 2 abortion providers in the U.S. He's been the subject of pickets. He's been the subject of protests. He's also been the subject of a documentary about his work. So he's very knowledgeable and very passionate about this. And during our conversation, he said to me, "Does your doctor do abortions?" And I was completely embarrassed. I had no idea. I'd never thought about it before, even though I was spending all day, every day, doing nothing except thinking about abortion. And so I had to say to him, "I don't know." I said, "Well, you have to ask. Because if doctors aren't doing abortions, why aren't women protesting that? Why aren't women demanding that their doctors provide the full range of health care they might need?" So the next time I had to go to the doctor, I said to him, "I'm not pregnant. I don't know when I will be pregnant, but just in case, do you do abortions?" And he said, "No, personally I don't, because I was trained at Georgetown. So it's a Jesuit school, doesn't teach these skills." But he followed up, "There are doctors in this clinic that are trained to do it, so if you ever do need abortion care, we can help you out." And I was so relieved to hear that. It was still not something I ever planned on needing, but I don't think anyone ever plans on needing an abortion. Almost by definition, it's something that happens when you're not expecting it for reasons that you cannot predict. So knowing that if I was ever in that situation, I had a doctor that I trusted and at a clinic that I trusted was a huge relief. On a wider scale, I learned that there are a number of serious threats that still exist to reproductive rights 40 years after Roe was supposed to have settled the issue. But one thing that many of the activists I spoke with brought up is that a lot of the threats are on the state level. And we've seen this in this area with what's been going on in Virginia this past year and a half or so. The trend in what Virginia is doing is representative of a larger trend of TRAP laws, and that stands for Targeted Regulation of Abortion Providers. These are laws that target only abortion clinics, only those freestanding medical clinics, and they seek to impose unique regulations that basically make it almost impossible, or could make it almost impossible, for clinics to continue to do their work. They impose certain building requirements, the same that hospitals may need to use. They impose certain requirements about the number of parking spaces a clinic must have, or the kinds of drinking fountains. Laws that have nothing to do with health and safety, but yet that's the reason that is given most times for these laws to be put in place. Another recent trend that we've also seen in DC is bans for abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy. I know Trent Franks attempted to put one over on DC last year. Fortunately, that was shot down. But in Franks' home state of Arizona, like many other states across the country, abortions are illegal after the 20th week. The rationale generally given for this is the concept of fetal pain, which is a controversial and very kind of proven, kind of not proven, depending on which study you read, subject that basically examines when in a pregnancy a fetus can feel pain. Most scientists don't think it happens as early as 20 weeks, certainly not as early as 18 weeks, which is what Franks is enforcing in Arizona. Yet this is still the rationale given to restrict a right that a lot of women do need to take advantage of if their health is threatened or if the health of the fetus is threatened and a later term abortion is needed. So these state-by-state bans, they don't make abortion illegal, but they make certain aspects of gaining an abortion illegal. And that is a troubling trend that is seeking to basically make Roe legal in name only. As disappointing and depressing, quite frankly, as a lot of this information that I learned is it's also nice to know there's a lot that can be done about these trends. And